Chapter 101 is where the whole thesis of omniscient reader's viewpoint gets stated out loud, and it does it through a series of gut-punch confrontations between a god who knows everyone's tragic ending and a group of people who refuse to accept the script. It's a chapter about fate, defiance, and the single most important word in this entire arc: companion. We open on the adult Yuzong still reeling from what she heard. A companion. How could you, Junghyuk, of all people, call someone that? She turns the word over like a blade she can't put down, wondering whether he could possibly have meant it. Maybe he was being sincere. And the possibility wounds her more than any lie would have, because if he was sincere, then the capacity was always there and she simply never received it. That unhealed ache drives everything she does in this chapter. And what she does is terrible. The catastrophe of floods tears across the battlefield, and she doesn't just fight Dokja's companions. She unmakes them psychologically, because she knows exactly how each of them dies. Having lived through rounds these people have never seen, she wields their futures like weapons. She starts with Lee Jaihai, the young fighter in the cap whose specialty is naval warfare. And the confrontation is chilling because Jaihai doesn't know her at all, while the catastrophe knows everything about Jaihai. She mocks the girl for not even recognizing her own name in the older woman's mouth, calls her a poor thing who has no idea what's coming. And then she describes it. She tells Jaihai how Junghyuk will use her and then discard her. She tells her that this girl who wants nothing more than to be accepted by Junghyuk will die in a naval battle. It's an unbearable thing to hear, your own death described by someone who watched it happen, and the cruelty of it is precise. The catastrophe isn't just killing people. She's showing them the meaninglessness she believes is waiting for them. But there's a strange, aching tenderness threaded through even this. Because after laying out that awful future, the catastrophe adds something almost gentle. She remarks that their naval battles will be harder from now on, and then tells Jaihai not to worry, because that ending won't happen in this round. It's a flicker of the person she used to be showing through the god she became, a woman who still, somewhere under thousands of years of bitterness, doesn't actually want this girl to suffer. It complicates her enormously, and it's why she's such a magnificent antagonist. She isn't evil. She's a wound. Then she turns on Lee Hyeon-seong, the steady, reliable man the group calls their shield, and delivers her most devastating monologue yet. She tells him how he died. He defended Junghyuk to his very last moment. After saving countless lives, he was reduced to ash by the breath of a dragon. She describes it with the weariness of someone who has watched good men throw themselves away for a man who couldn't love them back, and then she says the thing that reveals her whole grief. She's lost a handy shield. She knows the same pain he's about to feel. The things she's seen have hollowed her out. And this is the moment the chapter detonates, because Hyeon-seong looks at this god who just recited his death and rejects the entire premise. He isn't a follower of Yu Junghyuk, he tells her. He's a companion of Kim Dokja's. It's a short line and it changes everything. Because the catastrophe's whole worldview rests on the assumption that everyone orbits Junghyuk, that they all die as his tools the way she did. And here is a man calmly informing her that he belongs to a different story entirely, one with a different center, a different kind of leader, a different ending. He isn't defined by the fate she watched. He chose someone else. The catastrophe feels the ground shift. There's something different about this round, she realizes, and the realization visibly unnerves her. By her calculations, all these people should be either dead by now or following Junghyuk. Instead they're alive. Together, and loyal to a man who was never supposed to matter. She demands to know whose orders they're following, where the throne of this ruler even is. She can't locate the source of the change because the source isn't a throne or a power. It's Kim Dokja, and everything he chose differently. The action escalates enormously alongside the emotion. The catastrophe summons horrors, a Tier 5 sea beast, a monstrous Tier 5 ape, and the battlefield turns into chaos, ice and water and shattering stone. Roars, explosions, bodies flung through the air, the sheer scale of a god at war with an entire party. Hyen Seong takes brutal punishment. Jae-hai fights through her fear. The whole group is outclassed and they keep standing anyway, and every panel of it reinforces the theme, because they aren't standing for Jonghyuk. They're standing for each other, and for the man who taught them how. And then the story delivers its most beautiful turn, because the monsters themselves rebel. Queen Mirabad, a tremendous beast, comes for the catastrophe, and the flood god is genuinely bewildered. She knew this creature existed. She cannot understand why it's attacking her. The answer, of course, is the little girl. The child Yuzong, the beast lord Kim Dokja raised through kindness and belief, is turning the world's monsters against her own future self. The gift Dokja planted is now the weapon aimed at the tragedy he's trying to prevent. The chapter's emotional peak belongs to that child. She confronts the towering god wearing her own face and screams the question that breaks your heart. Is this the future her? And then, with all the desperate fury a small child can summon, she demands the impossible. Bring Mr. back to life. Not save me. Not spare us. Bring him back. In that moment the entire difference between the two Yuzongs is laid bare. One spent thousands of years serving a man who never called her a companion and came back as a catastrophe. The other has known Kim Dokja for days, and would tear down a god to get him back. That contrast is the whole argument of the arc, delivered by a weeping little girl to the monster she was supposed to become. Golden light blooms. Something is changing. Kim Dokja's name moves through the battlefield like a current, and even in death he is reshaping the fight, because everything happening here, the loyalty, the defiance, the monsters turning, the child's fury, all of it grows from choices he made. What makes chapter 101 so powerful is how completely it inverts the usual shape of a boss fight. The catastrophe's real weapon isn't her monsters or her strength. It's despair. She attacks people with their own futures, telling them exactly how meaningless their sacrifices will be, because meaninglessness is the truth she was forced to live. And one by one, they refuse it. Hyen Seong refuses to be Jonghyuk's discarded shield. Jae-hai keeps fighting despite hearing her own death sentence. The child Yuzong refuses the future written for her. The monsters refuse their master. Every refusal is a crack in the fixed narrative the catastrophe believes in, and every crack is Kim Dokja's doing. Because that's the answer to her accusation from before. She told Jonghyuk he couldn't save anyone. And this chapter's response is a battlefield full of people who were saved, standing between her and the city she came to destroy, all of them calling themselves companions of a man who is currently dead and still winning. Dokja didn't save them with power. He saved them by being someone worth choosing, and that choice is rewriting a story that was supposed to be unchangeable. By the end of chapter 101, the catastrophe is no longer certain of anything. Her knowledge of the future, her greatest weapon, is failing her, because this round has diverged from every round she remembers. The people who should be dead are alive. The people who should follow Jonghyuk follow someone else. Her own beasts turn against her. And a little girl with her face is screaming at her to undo a death, demanding a future the catastrophe never got to have. It's tragedy and hope colliding at full speed, and it leaves you desperate to see whether the thing that cannot be changed is finally, impossibly, about to change. It's worth pausing on why the word companion carries so much destructive force in this chapter, because it's doing an enormous amount of thematic work. In most stories, a hero earns loyalty through strength, and followers gather around whoever is most powerful. That is exactly the world the catastrophe understands. She spent millennia inside a hierarchy where Junhyuk stood at the top and everyone else existed to be spent. So when she meets people who calmly inform her that they belong to someone else, someone weaker, someone currently dead, her entire model of reality fails. She keeps searching for a throne because thrones are what she knows. She cannot conceive of a leader whose authority comes not from dominance but from having genuinely valued the people around him. That is the blind spot that will undo her, and it's the same blind spot Junhyuk carried for 1,000 lifetimes. Kim Dokja built something they both lacked the imagination to build, a group held together by mutual regard rather than necessity, and it turns out that kind of bond is far harder to break than fear or obligation. Watch how each of Dokja's people responds to having their deaths recited to them. None of them argue about whether her vision is accurate. They simply refuse to accept that it defines them. That refusal, repeated by person after person across this chapter, is what finally makes the catastrophe doubt herself, and doubt is the only crack a story this fixed was ever going to open. She came carrying perfect knowledge of the future, and she is discovering, one defiant answer at a time, that she is reading from the wrong book. Chapter 102 is one of the most audacious and emotionally shattering chapters in this entire stretch of Omniscient Reader's viewpoint, because it does something almost no story dares to do. It puts you inside the villain. Not metaphorically. Literally. Kim Dokja climbs into the mind of the catastrophe herself, and what he finds there rewrites everything. The chapter opens in the middle of carnage. The flood god is tearing through the battlefield, and her fury has curdled into something almost gleeful. She laughs bitterly at the realization that Junhyuk found another version of herself in this world, a younger self, and understands the implication instantly. He was trying to kill her by killing the young her. The cruelty of that lands hard, and she greets the child with a chilling little line. "Hello, past me." Two people wearing the same face, one who was saved and one who never was. The battle escalates into pure spectacle. Monsters clash across the ruins, a monarch-level insect answering the catastrophe's call, another vast beast standing with the child Yuzong. There's a wonderful moment where the little beast lord's control over a queen of insects is revealed, a child commanding creatures that should be far beyond her, and even the catastrophe is impressed despite herself. She tells the kid she has the potential of a lord, the skills to be a guide, an odd flicker of genuine respect from a god to the girl she used to be. But underneath all the monsters and explosions, the catastrophe is asking one question over and over, and it's eating at her. Where is Dokja? Who is that? She has been told her companion was killed in this round, she's watched people declare themselves loyal not to Junhyuk but to some man she's never heard of, and her carefully mapped understanding of the world keeps failing. The name Dokja Kim keeps surfacing in the mouths of people who should be someone else's followers. And she cannot locate him, because he's dead. That not knowing is driving her mad. And then the chapter delivers its extraordinary turn. Because Kim Dokja, still disembodied, still searching for someone thinking about him, finds the only mind in the world completely obsessed with him right now. Hers. The catastrophe has been demanding his name, thinking about him constantly, and that thought becomes the door. His skill activates, not the main character version but a supporting actor variant, and Kim Dokja possesses the catastrophe of floods. Where am I, he wonders, blinking into a consciousness that isn't his own. He had no idea he could actually possess a catastrophe. And the moment he's inside, he understands he's stumbled into something enormous and dangerous. He's seeing the world through her eyes. He rationalizes it, half amused, half appalled, figuring that since Junhyuk is tied up in his berserk rage, watching what this god is up to might actually be the more useful vantage point. But what he finds inside her is not a monster's mind. It's a graveyard. The narration here is devastating in its simplicity. He looked at the world through her eyes. He breathed through her nose. He killed people with her hands. And the line that lands like a hammer, the summary of the whole experience. He was using Shin. Not observing her. Being her. Every ounce of her rage, her exhaustion, her thousands of years, pouring straight through him. His personal skill, the fourth wall, the thing that normally keeps his emotions at a safe distance, begins shaking violently, because the sheer weight of her grief is more than any barrier can hold back. And in that flood of her thoughts, we hear what she's actually been screaming underneath all the destruction. It isn't hatred of the world. It's the unbearable arithmetic of a life spent for nothing. What about her? What about all the years she lived? What does she get in return for this round? Over and over, the same wound, the question no one ever answered. She endured for centuries. She wandered worlds. She gave everything. And nobody ever told her it mattered. So she'll kill them. All, she thinks, every one of them, because if her devotion meant nothing then nothing should be left standing. She feels him almost immediately, and her reaction is genuinely frightening. Who are you? Where is that voice coming from? Get out of my head. A god thrashing against an intruder in her own skull, unable to find him, unable to expel him. And Dokja, terrified and fascinated, realizes he has an opportunity nobody has ever had. If he can push, even slightly, from inside her, he can change what she does. He didn't plan this. He says so himself. He wasn't intending to go this far from the beginning. But he might be able to stop her. And then he corrects himself with that stubborn resolve that defines him. No. He has to try. What follows is one of the most quietly heroic sequences in the series, because Dokja's victory here is microscopic. He interferes with her action from the inside, and the system confirms it, a tiny disruption, nothing more. It feels like his entire body is burning up from the strain. And the result is almost nothing. He managed to sap a small fraction of the power behind her strike at Lee Jai-hai. That's it. A tiny change. Except that tiny change is the difference between life and death. Jai-hai survives because of it. So does Hyen Seong. Two people who, in every previous round, died horribly, get to keep breathing because a dead man burned himself up to shave a sliver of force off a single blow. That's the whole philosophy of Kim Dokja compressed into one moment. He can't beat a god. He can nudge one, at agonizing cost, and turn a fatality into a survival. And in a story about fixed, unchangeable fates, a single life saved is a crack in the wall of destiny. The system also notes that his understanding of the character, Yuzong Shin, has increased. That's the quiet horror running underneath the heroism. To save his friends, Dokja has to understand her. And to understand her, he has to live her pain. The more he saves, the more of her sorrow becomes his. The chapter's emotional centerpiece is what he finds when he goes deeper. Buried under the millennia of rage, past the flood of murderous thoughts, Dokja finds a memory. And in that memory, a young woman says something to the captain she followed, something she probably never got to say out loud when it counted. She wanted to survive too. That's it. That's the whole tragedy in 5 words. All the devotion, all the sacrifice, all the centuries of doing his bidding, and underneath it there was just a person who wanted to live. Who wanted to be one of the ones who made it. Nobody ever asked her. Nobody ever offered. She gave and gave until there was nothing left, and the thing she wanted most was so small and human that it breaks you to hear it from the mouth of a world-ending god. Dokja, inside her head, recognizes what he's looking at, and the fourth wall shudders again. This memory is something he was never meant to see, and it detonates everything. She isn't a catastrophe. She's a girl who wanted to survive, buried alive under thousands of years of being used. And then, because this series knows exactly where to put the knife, the child Yuzong senses him. Across the battlefield, the little girl looks at the towering monster wearing her adult face, and she knows. "Mister. It's you in there, right?" A child recognizing the man who saved her, inside the body of the woman she's fated to become. She calls out to him, desperate and hopeful, and the moment is almost unbearable because both Yuzongs are now reaching for the same person, the child who was saved and the adult who never was, and only one of them ever got to be. The two of them collide in a scream, past and future, saved and abandoned, and the chapter tears itself open with that image. Something in the memory breaks loose. Both of them cry out in denial. The world lurches. What makes chapter 102 so extraordinary is the structural bravery of it. Most stories build to a final battle where the hero defeats the villain with a bigger attack. This one has its hero possess the villain. And discover that she was never a villain at all, just the most thoroughly betrayed person in the entire story. Dokja doesn't fight her. He becomes her. And in becoming her, he learns the one thing that could actually end this, which isn't a weapon or a technique but the truth of what she needed and never received. And it recontextualizes the stakes completely. The scenario says defeat the catastrophe of floods, Yuzong Shin, or soul is destroyed. But after this chapter, defeat feels like the wrong word entirely. How do you defeat a wound? How do you kill someone whose whole crime is that she wanted to survive and nobody let her? The clear condition demands an ending Dokja is temperamentally incapable of accepting, which is exactly the position this series loves putting him in. There's also something profound in the mechanics of how he got in. He could only possess someone thinking about him. And the only person in the world thinking about Kim Dokja with total, consuming focus was the god trying to destroy everything he loved. Obsession became the door. Her fixation on the unknown name that had disrupted her perfect knowledge of the future is precisely what let that name walk into her mind. It's beautifully ironic, and it's the kind of clever plotting that makes this series sing. The action never lets up either. Ghost fleets and cannon fire, monsters clashing, Jai-Hai fighting through her wounds, Hyen Seong refusing to fall, the child Yuzong commanding creatures far beyond her level. The battlefield is enormous and desperate. But every explosion is background to the real war, which is being fought silently inside one woman's skull between the grief that made her a monster and the reader who refuses to let that be the last word. By the time chapter 102 ends, everything has changed. Two people are alive who should be dead, saved by an interference so small it barely registered. A god has an intruder in her mind she cannot evict. A child is calling out to the man she loves inside the body of her own worst future. And Kim Dokja has seen the memory at the bottom of a catastrophe's heart, the small, devastating wish that she wanted to survive too. He came looking for a body to fight from. He found a person nobody ever saved. And knowing Kim Dokja, that discovery is far more dangerous to the ending everyone expects than any weapon could ever be. Because the reader has just been handed the one thing that could rewrite this tragedy completely, not the knowledge of how to kill the catastrophe of floods, but the knowledge of what she actually wanted all along. It's worth dwelling on what the fourth wall actually represents in this chapter, because its failure here is the most revealing thing that happens. Throughout the series, that skill has functioned as Kim Dokja's emotional insulation, the barrier that lets him treat horror as information and grief as data. It is why he can calculate while people die around him, why he can read a tragedy and plan 3 steps past it. It is, in a very real sense, the thing that lets him remain a reader instead of becoming a character. And in this chapter, for the first time, it buckles. It shakes violently, again and again, unable to filter what he is being forced to feel. That detail tells you everything about the magnitude of the catastrophe's pain. It is not merely sad. It is so vast that it overwhelms the mechanism designed to keep sadness at arm's length. Dokja spends this chapter losing the distance that defines him, and the story treats that loss as both the price of understanding and the source of his power. He can only change her because he stopped observing her and started being her. There's a deeper irony threaded through all of it too. Dokja's entire advantage in this world has always been that he read the novel, that he knows these people as characters on a page. But knowing a character and knowing a person are not remotely the same thing, and this chapter forces him across that line. He thought he understood Yuzong-shin because he had read about her. Then he lived inside her, and discovered that the text never contained the part that mattered, the quiet, unspoken wish underneath all her actions. Novels record what characters do. They rarely capture what they never got to say. And the thing Dokja finds at the bottom of her mind is precisely the thing no reader could have known from the outside. Consider also how radically this reframes the nature of his interference. The system tells him he changed a character's action, and the change is almost nothing, a fraction of force removed from a single strike. But two people survive because of it. In a story obsessed with grand powers and cosmic hierarchies, the most consequential act in this chapter is a microscopic nudge that cost a man his own agony to produce. That is the shape of heroism this series believes in. Not a decisive blow that ends everything, but a tiny, excruciating adjustment repeated at unbearable cost, until the story bends. Fate here is not a wall you shatter. It is a current you divert by inches. And notice what the system rewards him with. Not power. Understanding. His comprehension of Yuzong-shin increases, and that comprehension is presented as the actual prize, the thing that will matter later. In most stories, the hero grows stronger. In this one, the hero grows more capable of understanding the person he is supposed to destroy, and you can feel the story quietly promising that this, not any weapon, is what will finally resolve the catastrophe of floods. The path to saving the world runs directly through the act of genuinely knowing someone the world threw away. Chapter 103 is a resurrection, a revelation, and a declaration, and it might be the single most important turning point of the entire arc. It begins inside the catastrophe's memories, in the deepest and saddest place this story has taken us, and it ends with Kim Dokja standing in front of a god and refusing, absolutely, to do the one thing the entire world is demanding of him. We open where the last chapter left us, drowning in the buried heart of the flood god. That quiet, devastating wish surfaces again, a young woman telling her captain that she wanted to survive too, asking whether her own life could possibly have been worth living. And then the darker thought that followed it, the despair of wondering what the point of living even is when everything has ended up like this. It's the whole tragedy of her existence compressed into two questions nobody ever answered for her. And then Kim Dokja notices something extraordinary. The memories of the two Yuzongs, the child and the catastrophe, are starting to link together. That should be impossible. According to the disconnected film theory, the theory Dokja himself explained not long ago, two versions of a person from different worlds can coexist but can never share their history. Separate reals, remember. Separate lives. Nothing that happens to one should bleed into the other. But that theory, Dokja realizes with a jolt, only applies to characters. And he is not a character. He's a reader. An outsider who was never supposed to exist inside this novel at all. And that means the two films that were never meant to be linked have been spliced together by him. By the one variable this world's rules never accounted for. It's a brilliant, chilling revelation, because it reframes Dokja's entire presence in the story. He isn't just someone who knows the plot. He's a foreign element bending the very physics of how this reality's fates connect. His existence is the bridge between a doomed timeline and a hopeful one. The catastrophe feels him rummaging through her soul and thrashes against it, screaming for him to get out of her head. And Dokja, burning up from the strain, starts thinking strategically even in agony. He's beginning to feel what she feels, and he realizes that if he can just hold on a little longer, the catastrophe might collapse under the weight of her own grief without a single blow being struck. His plan isn't to kill her. It's to endure her. And then, in a cascade of system messages, something wonderful happens. Body regeneration commences. Conflicting skills resolve. The Immortal King's effect finally applies. And the words nobody expected to see appear. His body is revived from death. Kim Dokja comes back to life. The chapter earns a big laugh out of the moment, too. Dokja wakes up genuinely delighted that his clothes and items survived the process, that little burst of relief undercutting the enormity of returning from the dead. His stats have shot past the scenario's limits. He's alive, powered up, and completely improbable, and the reactions around him are perfect. His companions stare in disbelief. Someone gasps his name. And Junghyuk, in one of the most quietly affectionate lines this cold man has ever delivered, warns him not to make him kill him again, because if Dokja dies twice it'll stick. The regressor who grieved so violently a chapter ago now covers that grief with a grumble, and it's a beautiful bit of character work. But Dokja doesn't celebrate. He goes straight to the catastrophe. She's collapsed, drained, her power broken from the inside by the memories she couldn't hold back. And Dokja walks toward her while everyone warns him that she's dangerous. He tells them he'll be fine. He tells her they don't have much time. Come with me. The exchange that follows is extraordinary. She stares at this man she cannot place and demands to know who he is. Everything is ruined because of him. None of this ever happened in the round she knew. Her perfect knowledge of the future, the thing that made her a god, has been shredded by a person who shouldn't exist. And Dokja answers her with a line that lands like a benediction. He's been waiting for her for a long time. Welcome. Not welcome to the battlefield. Welcome to a world that finally has a place for you. A man greeting a woman who was thrown away by every timeline she ever lived in, and telling her she was expected. That she was wanted. She demands again to know who he is, and his answer is the thesis of the entire series. He's someone who wants to build the same world she does. Because underneath the catastrophe's rage was never a desire to destroy. It was a desire for a world where devotion is answered, where the people who sacrifice get to survive too. That's the world she wanted. And Dokja is telling her, plainly, that he wants it too, and that he intends to build it. Then comes the declaration that ends the chapter and reframes the whole scenario. Dokja turns to everyone, to his companions, to the watching constellations, to the machinery of the apocalypse itself, and says it. He won't kill the catastrophe. It's an outrageous thing to say. The scenario is explicit. Defeat the catastrophe of floods, Yuzong Shin, or soul is destroyed. Every rule, every incentive, every ounce of pressure from the system says kill her. And Kim Dokja looks at all of it and refuses, because he has been inside her head. He has felt her exhaustion, seen the memory of a girl who wanted to survive, and understood that she isn't a monster to be defeated but a person nobody ever saved. Killing her would be doing to her exactly what the world has always done. What makes chapter 103 so powerful is how it braids all its elements into one statement. The film-linking revelation establishes that Dokja is the anomaly capable of connecting fates that were never meant to touch. His resurrection proves that even death doesn't bind him to the rules. And his refusal to kill the catastrophe is the natural consequence of both. If you're the one variable the story can't predict, and even death won't hold you, then why on earth would you accept an ending you find unacceptable? There's also something deeply moving in how his companions react. Nobody restrains him. Nobody calls him insane. They're worried, they warn him, but they let him walk toward the god who was tearing them apart minutes ago, because they trust him. That trust, earned across this entire arc, is the invisible foundation everything now rests on. By the final panel, everything hangs on a single sentence. A dead man came back to life, walked up to a world-ending catastrophe, told her she was welcome, and then announced to the universe that he would not do the thing the universe requires. The scenario has no answer for that. The constellations have no answer for that. And the woman on the ground, hollowed out by thousands of years of being used and discarded, has just been told by a stranger that he's been waiting for her, and that he wants to build the world she gave everything for. It's the moment where mercy stops being a personal choice and becomes open defiance of the entire system. Kim Dokja isn't just saving one person anymore. He's declaring war on the idea that stories have to end the way they were written. Chapter 104 is where Kim Dokja's philosophy gets articulated in full, and where the universe immediately tries to crush him for it. It's a chapter of speeches, defiance, legal loopholes, and a truly devastating offer made to a woman who has nothing left to live for. It opens on the fallout of his declaration. He won't kill the catastrophe, and he won't entertain objections. He asks his companions, plainly, to go along with his decision. And their responses are quietly beautiful. One of them says he must have something in mind and pledges to support him. Another says she's fine with it if that's what he wants. Even Junghyuk, after a moment of pure exasperation, mutters that Dokja always does whatever he wants anyway and lets it go. It's an extraordinary display of earned trust. These people have watched him die, come back, and now announce he's protecting the monster that nearly killed them all, and they simply back him. The catastrophe herself is contemptuous. She laughs at the absurdity, demands to know who he thinks he is, asks whether he seriously isn't going to kill her. Because being spared makes no sense in the world she knows. Mercy isn't a thing that happens. And then she voices the despair underneath everything, and it's crushing. The world of the round she came from is gone. Not just changed, gone, in the entire universe, across all timelines. The people she knew don't exist anymore. Everyone she loved, everything she suffered for, all of it erased. So what could this stranger possibly know? All those years she endured, all that pain, how is she supposed to simply forget it? This is the moment Kim Dokja steps up and delivers the speech that defines him, and it's remarkable because it isn't comforting. It's an honest confession of how he operates. He tells her that he kills people because they'll become villains. He kills people because they'll end up killing his friends. And sometimes he saves people because they'll become allies. He admits, fully, that none of it has happened yet. That the people he judges don't remember him and haven't done anything wrong. And yet he acts anyway, believing they'll follow the paths they were destined to walk, because to him those futures are real and certain. And then the line that cracks the whole thing open. If he denied all of that, he couldn't go on living. Because the future knowledge is the only foundation he has. It's the same weight she carries, the same curse, memories of things that haven't happened being just as real as the present. He isn't lecturing her from above. He's telling her he lives the same impossible way she does, that he understands the specific madness of holding a future nobody else can see. She lashes back, furious that it's precisely because people like him live this way that she and her friends suffered. And Dokja's answer is startling. So live the way I do, Yuzung. Not forget. Not heal. Not move on. Keep carrying it, the way he does, and act anyway. And then comes the offer, and it's one of the most extraordinary things anyone in this series has ever said. He tells her that if she wants, she can go on living with the goal of killing him in this round. He will be the object of her contempt. He hands her a reason to keep existing, and the reason is hatred of him. Think about what that actually is. She has no world, no people, no purpose. The only thing sustaining her was rage, and Dokja just gave that rage a legitimate target and a future tense. Live, he tells her. Live to destroy me. Because a person with something to hate is a person who keeps going, and a person who keeps going might one day find something better to live for. It's a profoundly generous act disguised as an insult, and he closes it with the sentence that reframes her entire existence. This is her new round. The chapter notes something poignant here too, that the one person in this world who truly understands her pain is Yu Jonghyuk, the regressor, because all regressors live their lives in contempt of things that haven't happened yet. The man who wounded her. And the man who can most understand her are the same person, and the tragedy of that never stops aching. But the universe isn't going to let this stand. A Dakibi appears, a mid-grade one, and shuts the whole thing down. He can't allow it. The group protests that they haven't broken any scenario rules, and he corrects them coldly. How can you keep a catastrophe alive? The goal of the scenario is to defeat it. If they won't stay true to that, then the Dakibis will kill her themselves. And here Kim Dokja pulls out the move that makes this chapter sing, because he doesn't argue morality. He argues the rules. He reminds them, with perfect clarity, that this particular scenario had no time limit. None was ever specified. Which means it's entirely up to them to decide when they kill the catastrophe. It's a magnificent, loyally piece of loophole hunting, the reader who memorized the text turning a missing line of fine print into a shield for someone's life. The Dakibi is visibly rattled, noting how rare it is for characters to push back against the system like this. The constellations, of course, adore it. They love it when the line between good and evil blurs, and the powerful watchers lean in with fascination as a mortal argues procedure with a game master to protect a god who tried to end the world. But the Dakibi has his own counter, and it's vicious. If he can't force them directly, he'll create a sub-scenario. A new quest appears, the same target, the same catastrophe, but with the reward doubled. Twice the coins of the main scenario for whoever kills Yuzungshin. He can't make Dokja's group do it, so he weaponizes everyone else, effectively putting a massive bounty on her head and inviting the entire city to collect it. It's a chilling reminder that the system is not a neutral referee, it's a showrunner, and it will manufacture drama by any means available. And the hunters come. Powerful incarnations begin arriving to claim the prize, formidable figures with grand titles, kings and rulers of their own domains, drawn by a reward too enormous to ignore. The battlefield that was finally quieting down fills up again with people who want the woman Dokja just promised to protect. He meets them without flinching. He warns them not to move, and when they hesitate, he needles them, expressing mock disappointment that the incarnations of this city turned out to be such cowards. It's classic Dokja, using provocation as a weapon, buying time, reading the room, controlling a confrontation he has no business surviving. And the catastrophe, watching all of this unfold, asks him a question that reveals how much has already shifted between them. Why doesn't he just give it up? Haven't they done enough to satisfy the watchers by now? She's thinking about the audience, about the show, about the machinery, which means she's started thinking strategically alongside him instead of simply raging. Dokja catches it immediately and is delighted, asking whether she's really thinking that far ahead already. That small exchange is the seed of everything to come. The woman who came to destroy Seoul is now, however grudgingly, participating in Kim Dokja's plan. Chapter 104 is a masterclass in how this series does conflict. There's barely any fighting. The battle is philosophical, procedural, and emotional. Dokja wins ground by explaining how he lives, by offering a broken god a reason to keep breathing, and by finding a missing time limit in a contract. And the system fights back not with monsters but with economics, doubling a bounty to turn the whole city into assassins. It's brilliant, and it leaves you certain of one thing. Kim Dokja has decided that this ending will not stand, and he is prepared to argue, scheme, and bleed his way to a better one. It's worth appreciating how unusual this chapter is as a piece of storytelling. The climax of a scenario against a world-ending catastrophe should, by every convention, be a fight. Instead, the decisive weapon Dokja reaches for is an argument about an unstated time limit. And the decisive act of compassion is an offer to be hated. Neither of those is how these stories normally work, and that's exactly why they land. Dokja wins ground not by hitting harder but by reading the contract more carefully than the people who wrote it, and he reaches a suicidal god not with comfort but with brutal honesty about how he himself survives an unbearable knowledge of the future. He never tells her the pain will fade. He never promises her a happy ending. He simply hands her a target and a next round, because he understands that what a person in that much despair needs is not consolation but a reason to still be here tomorrow. That is a startlingly mature idea to build a chapter around, and it's why the exchange between them resonates far beyond the battlefield it happens on. Chapter 105 is a tragedy in the truest sense, the chapter where Dokja's greatest strength becomes the exact reason he loses, and where a woman who dared to hope for the first time in thousands of years has that hope surgically removed. It's brilliant, cruel storytelling, and it hurts. It opens with the Dokja grinning at Dokja and calling him an amazing showman, acknowledging that violence isn't the only thing that entertains an audience. And that compliment is the key to everything Dokja has been doing. Because the chapter finally lays out the full shape of his plan, and it's magnificent. He hasn't been trying to defeat the catastrophe. He's been trying to win over the crowd. Every move he's made has been theater aimed at the constellations. He chose his words carefully to slip past the Star Stream's censorship. He deliberately framed the catastrophe sympathetically, presenting her not as a monster but as a victim, so the watching gods would pity her situation. He made them root for his rebellion. He turned a boss fight into a moral drama and cast himself as the man refusing to execute a broken woman, because he understood the single most important rule of this world. The goal of a scenario can only change in one miraculous circumstance, when the majority of the constellations watching actually want it to change. And for a glorious stretch, it seems to be working. Support messages roll in. Constellations declare themselves moved by his determination. He presses the Dokja, pointing out that there's nothing stopping them from moving on to the sixth scenario even if the fifth hasn't formally concluded, demanding they either pay out or let things proceed. He's arguing rules and sentiment simultaneously, and he's winning. Which is exactly when the Dokja tells him the truth, and it lands like ice water. He calls Dokja the most intelligent and the most dangerous incarnation he knows. And then he says that this time, that intelligence will be his downfall. What follows is the system flexing power we've never seen before. The Dokja invokes something called scenario enforcement, tied to the cogwheel of scenarios, and the control over the catastrophe of floods is transferred to him by contract. Purple chains erupt. And then the system does the unthinkable. It forcibly changes a character's personality. Yuzong Shin's alignment is fixed to evil. Take a second with that, because it's horrifying. Scenario enforcement is the power to control the fate of every part that makes up a scenario. It's almost never used, because it violates the rule of plausibility too severely. The story itself normally refuses to allow this kind of naked authorial override. Which means the fact that it's happening tells us something devastating. The majority of the constellations have agreed that this change in direction is plausible. The audience signed off on it. Dokja is stunned. Why have the constellations turned their backs on him? Every message he saw was favorable. And the Dokja delivers the lesson with something almost like pity. Did Dokja really think he could control the constellations that easily? Humans, he notes, have a tendency to believe only what they want to believe. And crucially, not all constellations send messages in chat. The silent ones, the ones who never announce themselves, were making their own judgments the whole time. And then Dokja realizes what he actually did wrong, and it's the most painful kind of consequence, the kind that circles back from a victory. His earlier trick. The rigged subscriber count. The scheme where Baihyung's channel could never exceed 9,999 so that Dokja could reap the benefits of the event without honoring his promise. He was so pleased with that con. And the smarter constellations, it turns out, saw through it immediately. They knew the cap was artificial. They simply played along to see where he was going with it. But they filed it away. They won't fall for his tricks anymore. He underestimated them. He treated an audience of ancient, cunning gods like marks at a carnival, and they remembered. His cleverness bought him a short-term win and cost him the long-term trust he needed at the exact moment it mattered most. That's a genuinely brilliant piece of consequence writing, a chapter reaching back to punish a scheme we all cheered for. But the true devastation of chapter 105 isn't Dokja's defeat. It's what that defeat does to her. Because we get to be inside the catastrophe's head as the enforcement takes hold, and what we find there is unbearable. For a brief moment, she thought there was hope. She actually let herself wonder whether she could really do this, whether she might not have to give up on this world after all. After thousands of years of nothing, one strange man told her she was welcome and offered to build the world she wanted, and something in her started to believe it. And then it's taken away. The chains close. Her alignment is forcibly rewritten. And her last thought before the system erases her choices is the saddest sentence in the entire arc. Of course. This place was hopeless as well. She let herself hope one time, and the universe punished her for it, and now she'll go back to being a monster because the story requires a monster. She isn't even allowed to be a person anymore. She screams as it happens. Her body twists. The gentle possibility Dokja opened in her is bulldozed flat, and what stands up afterward is a puppet wearing her face, dragged back into the villain role by the machinery of the show. The chapter forces Dokja to watch it and then to fight it. The enforced catastrophe goes after the child, and Dokja loses his composure entirely, screaming that if she harms that kid he'll never forgive her. It's raw in a way he rarely allows himself to be, because everything he's built this arc on is being crushed in front of him. But he doesn't fold. He never does. Having been inside her mind, Dokja emerged with something, a skill absorbed from the immersion, the sentiments of a beast king now his to wield. Even that, he acknowledges bitterly, won't be nearly enough. So he calls for help. Cover me, he tells Junghyuk. And Junghyuk, in a line that carries a whole complicated relationship inside it, agrees to play his part. If this is what Dokja wants, then he'll stop the catastrophe, and he'll act it out for him as much as he likes. There's exhaustion in it, and loyalty, and the sense of a man who long ago stopped arguing with this ridiculous reader and simply started backing him. Dokja rearranges his bookmarks, swapping in a new character to draw power from, preparing for a fight he's already lost the moral version of. And the narration names the cost plainly. This is the price he pays for failing to change the scenario. The chapter ends on the most crushing note possible. The catastrophe, forced back into evil, hollowed out, tells him it's fine. Go ahead and kill her. The woman who wanted to survive, who had one moment of believing she might get to, has been shoved back into the role of monster and is now inviting her own execution, because that's what the story wants and she's too tired to fight the story anymore. What makes chapter 105 so extraordinary is how it refuses to let Kim Dokja be untouchable. Every previous chapter showed us a reader outmaneuvering gods, rigging systems, dying and coming back, bending fate with tiny nudges. This one shows us the limits. The audience is smarter than he assumed. The system has powers he didn't account for. And when he pushed too hard on a story that didn't want to bend, it pushed back and broke the one person he was trying to save. But it also sharpens the stakes into something unbearable. Because Dokja now knows what's underneath that forced evil alignment. He's been in there. He's seen the girl who wanted to survive. So when he raises his hand against the catastrophe now, he isn't fighting a monster. He's fighting a puppet strung up over someone he promised to save, and every blow he lands is aimed at a woman the system won't let be a person. That's the horror this chapter leaves you with. Not that Dokja might lose. That he might win, in exactly the way the show demands, and lose the only thing that ever mattered to him about this fight. And there's one more layer of cruelty worth naming, because it's the sharpest edge in the chapter. The system did not simply overpower Kim Dokja. It beat him at his own game. His entire method has always been to understand the audience better than anyone, to know what the constellations want and give it to them in exchange for what he needs. The Dakibi's counter is to demonstrate that the audience understood him first. They read his cheap trick, filed it away, and then withheld the support he was counting on at the precise moment his plan depended on it. For a character whose superpower is comprehension, being outread is the most humiliating possible defeat. And the story is careful to make clear that this wasn't bad luck. It was earned, chapter by chapter, by a man who got a little too pleased with his own cleverness and forgot that the gods watching him have been playing this game for a very, very long time. Chapter 106 is Kim Dokja's revenge, and it is deliciously, brilliantly cruel. Because after the system crushed him last chapter by forcibly rewriting a woman's alignment to evil, Dokja does the one thing nobody saw coming. He takes that forced label and turns it into a weapon aimed straight back at the people who imposed it. It starts with the bookmark he prepared. Having reached a significant understanding of one of the characters he studied, Dokja is permitted to claim one of their skills as his own, and he selects something extraordinary. The time of judgment, activated at a high level, with a 30-minute duration. And then the chapter explains exactly what that skill is, and the whole thing clicks into place with a beautiful, vicious logic. The time of judgment was a power wielded by Valkyries during the Holy War. Its user receives the protection of the archangels themselves. And the crucial clause, the one that makes this chapter sing, is that the user never loses as long as the target is evil. Evil. The exact alignment that Dakibi forcibly stamped onto Yuzong-shin one chapter ago to make her a proper villain for the show. Dokja lays it out with quiet savagery. They have no choice but to allow him to use this skill. Because the thing standing in front of him right now is, by the system's own official declaration, clearly evil. They rewrote her into a monster to force the story back on track, and in doing so they handed Dokja an unbeatable weapon against her. The trap they built becomes the tool he wields. It's the single most satisfying reversal in the whole arc. The constellations react immediately. The pure good alignment stirs, because Dokja is invoking a sacred power he was never chosen to hold. He notes the surprise himself, aware that he's using a judge's authority without ever having been appointed a judge. The audacity of it is astonishing, a mortal borrowing the machinery of heaven through a technicality and daring anyone to object. The skill activates with the command to punish evil, and the battlefield ignites. Dokja moves with borrowed divine authority, and for the first time in this fight, he can actually hurt her. But the chapter refuses to make it easy, and it complicates things with a nasty piece of logic. Because the more evil she becomes, the stronger Yuzong gets. Her forced alignment isn't just a label, it's fuel. Every step deeper into villainy makes her more powerful. So Dokja is in an arms race against the very corruption he's exploiting, and even with a skill that supposedly cannot lose, he realizes he can't do this alone. So he does what he always does. He calls on everyone. He shouts for the group to attack, for others to hold off the monsters pouring through the gate. And the response is heartening. Allies step up, one promising to keep the catastrophe at bay, another taking covering fire. This is the payoff of every relationship Dokja has built, an entire team moving in coordination because one man refused to abandon anybody. The chapter also drops a revelation that deepens the tragedy enormously. Yuzong's soul has been pawned to a demon. She made a bargain to cross over into this world, trading away the deepest part of herself to get here. And that soul now sits in the hands of the Dokja. It reframes everything about her situation. She isn't just a broken woman being puppeted by the scenario. She's someone who sold the last thing she owned for a chance to change something, and the buyers are using it as a leash. There's a lovely, tense practical beat too. Dokja and Jonghyuk compare their remaining skill durations, both running on 30-minute clocks. It's such a small exchange but it crackles, two people who barely tolerate each other synchronizing watches before diving into a fight neither expects to walk out of cleanly. And then Jonghyuk simply says let's go, and they move together. The combat that follows is enormous. Dokja unleashes the power he absorbed from inside the catastrophe's own mind, the breath of the Beast King, hurling her own nature back at her. Explosions rip through the ruins. The constellations lose their minds over it, going wild for the action, unable to look away. The Dokja observes with delight that this is finally what he'd call a proper scenario, and there's something sickening in that, the reminder that all this suffering is content for an audience. And that's the tension humming under every panel. Dokja is winning the fight, but he's winning it by giving the show exactly what it wanted. He gets to hurt her because the system declared her evil. The crowd cheers because the spectacle is magnificent. The Dokja is thrilled because his manipulation produced an incredible battle either way. Even Dokja's most brilliant counterplay feeds the machine he's trying to defy. What makes chapter 106 so exhilarating is the sheer intelligence of the central move. Dokja doesn't overpower the system. He reads it, the way he reads everything, and finds the clause that turns its own ruling against it. You want her to be evil? Fine. Then I get to use the weapon that only works on evil. It's the essence of his character, a man whose real power has never been strength but comprehension, wielding rules like blades. And underneath the cleverness, the heartbreak never lets up. Every strike he lands is against a woman he promised to save. The skill works precisely because the system stripped her personhood away. To fight her, he has to accept, at least tactically, the very label he spent chapters arguing against. There's a scene where the catastrophe wonders whether this is what a certain devoted ally felt during all the times she fought for her, and it's a devastating flicker of the person still trapped under the enforced evil, remembering loyalty, remembering being cared for. By the end of the chapter, the battle is at full roar. 30-minute clocks are ticking. Monsters pour through gates. Allies hold lines. Dokja fights with stolen divine authority and stolen beast power, Jonghyuk carves through the chaos beside him, and the constellations feast on every second of it. The catastrophe grows stronger the more the system corrupts her, meaning this fight gets harder the longer it lasts. And Kim Dokja, who never wanted this fight at all, keeps swinging with a weapon he only possesses because his enemies made a woman into a monster. That contradiction is the beating heart of the chapter. He's using the injustice to survive the injustice. And you can feel, in every panel, that he hasn't given up on the other ending, the one where she doesn't have to be evil at all. He's just buying time until he can find it. There's a bleak elegance to the trap the story has built here, and it's worth stating plainly. The system needed a villain, so it manufactured one by decree. But the moment it wrote that label onto a living person, the label became an object in the world, something with weight and consequences that anyone could pick up. Dokja simply picked it up. That is the recurring lesson of this entire series in miniature. Rules are not walls, they are handles, and the person who reads them most carefully gets to decide which direction they pull. The Dokja thought he was closing a door. He was handing over a key. And the fact that Dokja needed that key at all, that he could only touch her because she had been stripped of her personhood, is the wound the chapter never lets close. Chapter 107 is a chapter of arrivals and defiance, and it contains one of the most quietly magnificent lines Kim Dokja has ever delivered. It's also where the last card he was holding finally hits the table, and it comes wreathed in white fire. The chapter opens with the battle at full intensity and Dokja in a genuinely dangerous mood. The constellations have been chattering all fight, some praising him, some mocking him, all of them treating this desperate struggle as content to consume. And Dokja, bleeding and outmatched, addresses them directly with a promise that should terrify anyone paying attention. Go wild, he tells them. Run your mouths all you want. Until the day he comes to pluck out their tongues. Sit with that for a second. He is a mortal in the middle of a losing battle, and he has just promised a gallery of ancient gods that he will one day climb up there and shut them up personally. It's not bravado. It's a mission statement. Kim Dokja has decided that the audience feeding on human suffering is itself an enemy to be dealt with eventually, and the sheer nerve of announcing that mid-fight is breathtaking. The constellations of war take notice of his bravery. Others watch with new interest. Even his enemies are, on some level, impressed. Meanwhile the catastrophe presses her advantage, and she's brutal about it. She tells him plainly that he's no match for her, that he could never hope to stop her. The enforced evil alignment has made her stronger with every passing moment, and she's not wrong about the power gap. Dokja is running on a borrowed skill with a ticking clock, and the numbers do not favor him. And then he answers her question. She asks how he could ever stop her, and he tells her the person who will stop her is on the way. Crash. Hui-Won Jong arrives. The Judge of Evil, the last card Dokja had left to play, comes crashing onto the battlefield exactly when she's needed. She apologizes for being late with wonderful casualness, explaining that she basically knows what's going on because her supporting constellations wouldn't stop chattering at her the whole way over. And then she tells Dokja to leave it to her and take a little rest, because she's going to end this scenario for him. It's such a great entrance, all confidence and dry humor, the cavalry arriving with perfect comic timing in the middle of a tragedy. And Dokja lets himself hope, though he's honest about the stakes. She's the last card he has. If this doesn't work, there's nothing else. What follows is a spectacular escalation. Hui-Won activates her stigma, the flames of hell at a devastating level, and the chapter takes a moment to explain just how significant that is. It's a blistering white flame that exists specifically to punish evildoers, ranked among the most powerful stigmas in this entire world, on par with the fearsome power of one of the great prisoner constellations. This isn't a minor reinforcement. This is one of the heaviest weapons on the board. And then the story reveals who backs her, and the moment lands like a thunderclap. Her supporting constellation is Archangel Uriel. One of the great angels, a genuine power of the highest order, declaring the catastrophe a worthy opponent as the flames rise. The scale of the fight has just jumped again, from mortals scrambling against a god to a proxy war between heavenly powers. The constellation politics get wonderfully tense here. A dragon constellation displays open hostility toward Uriel. The mysterious scribe of heaven pointedly remains silent, watching without committing. Another watcher observes the battle with sad eyes, a small heartbreaking detail suggesting that not everyone in that gallery is enjoying this. The cosmos is choosing sides, and the tension between them is almost as dangerous as the fight itself. Then the flames come down, and the combat is gorgeous and merciless. White fire against a flood god, explosions tearing the ruins apart, and the constellations losing their composure entirely. Most of them, we're told, are excited by the plot. Dokja has woven, and he's rewarded with a substantial gift of coins for the sheer entertainment value. It's a bitter kind of victory, being paid by the same audience whose approval he needed and lost. And then Hui Wen lands the decisive blow. A stab, clean and terrible, and the catastrophe reels. Blood falls. The great enemy who has dominated this entire arc staggers under the judgment of hellfire, and her monstrous form begins to give way. Thud. The god who came to drown Soul is on the ground. But the chapter refuses to let that feel like triumph, and this is where its real intelligence shows. Because the reaction shots aren't cheers. The constellations of this peninsula look at Dokja with pity. The secretive plotter takes careful note of the decision he made. Everyone watching understands what this victory actually cost him. He wanted to save her. He argued with the system, exploited loopholes, offered her a reason to live, and promised to build the world she wanted. And when the machinery of the story forced her into villainy anyway, he did the only thing left, he called in his last favor and had her struck down. The plan he fought so hard for has failed, and he's winning the fight he never wanted to win. That's why the pity from the watching constellations stings so much. They're not looking at a hero who triumphed. They're looking at a man who tried to change an ending, failed, and now has to live with the version of the story he was trying to prevent. What makes chapter 107 so effective is the way it delivers pure crowd-pleasing spectacle, an epic arrival, a legendary stigma, an archangel's backing, a decisive strike, while quietly making all of it taste like ash. Huen's entrance is thrilling. Uriel's presence is awe-inspiring. The flames are gorgeous. And none of it is what Kim Dokja actually wanted. The chapter closes on blood dripping and a fallen catastrophe, the scenario's clear condition finally within reach. Defeat the catastrophe of floods, Yuzong Shin. The system wanted this. The Dakibi engineered it. The constellations paid for it. And Dokja, standing in the wreckage of his own better plan, has to decide what to do in the moments he has left. Because knowing Kim Dokja, a fallen enemy and a satisfied audience are not the same thing as an ending. He's been beaten on this front, badly. But the story isn't over while he's still breathing, and somewhere under all that enforced evil is still the woman who said she wanted to survive too. The chapter leaves you certain he hasn't stopped looking for the door out of this, even standing over the body of the person he promised to save. And it's worth noticing how carefully the chapter frames its own spectacle. The arrival, the legendary stigma, the archangel's blessing, all of it is staged like a triumphant turning point, the kind of sequence that would end a lesser story on a cheer. But the reaction shots refuse to cooperate. Nobody celebrates. The watchers pity him. His allies look grim. The story is showing you a victory and simultaneously telling you it is not won, and that dissonance is the whole point of the chapter. Winning the fight was never the goal. It was the failure condition. Chapter 108 is a farewell, and it is devastating in the quietest possible way. After all the spectacle, all the monsters and divine flames and cosmic politics, this chapter slows almost to a stop so that a dying woman can finally have the conversation she waited thousands of years to have. It opens with her asking, almost curiously, whether she's going to die now. And the answer is yes. A beast lord of her caliber wouldn't normally fall from a wound like that, but she was struck by flames designed specifically to eradicate evil, and the system had already declared her evil. The very corruption forced on her is what made the killing blow possible. There is no cruelty in this story that doesn't circle back. Kim Dokja's own skill deepens as he watches, his understanding pushed into continuous effect by how completely immersed he's become in her. He can't look away from this. He isn't allowed to. And then she talks, and the chapter becomes something extraordinary. She says she's glad she came to this round. Glad she did what her captain asked of her. And then, with a small, aching honesty, she admits it pains her to have to die like this. Someone tells her that at least now she can go without any worries, that maybe things really will change this time. And her answer is the simplest, most human thing imaginable. She doesn't want to die. That's it. No grand villain's monologue, no curse on the world. A woman who spent millennia being spent for someone else's cause, at the very end, just saying she doesn't want to go. It's the same wish Dokja found buried in her memories, spoken out loud at last, and it lands like a stone in your chest. The Dakibi, for his part, asks with grotesque cheer whether it's alright if he indulges in a dramatic little rant, since they've put on such an excellent scenario. The obscenity of that is the point. To him, a person's death is a finale to be savored. But the heart of the chapter is her last exchange with Yoo Jung-hyuk. She tells him there's something she desperately wants to hear from him, something she wishes she could hear even once. And the way the scene plays out is masterful, because the story doesn't spell out every word. She calls him predictable to the very end. She tells him he hasn't changed at all, and then, in the same breath, admits that this unchanging quality is exactly why she looked up to him. All that bitterness, all that accusation from earlier, resolving into something closer to love than hate. And she leaves him with a promise that is also a curse and also, somehow, a kindness. She'll watch him for all the years to come. She'll have her revenge on him. It's a threat delivered with the warmth of someone who has finally made peace, choosing to frame her continued attention as vengeance because that's the only vocabulary they ever shared. Goodbye, Captain. Jung-hyuk's answer is 3 words that undo you completely. You did good. Rest now. That's what she wanted to hear. Across thousands of years, through every sacrifice, that was the whole thing. Not love, not apology. Just acknowledgement that what she did mattered and permission to stop. The narration notes that they didn't need to speak all the words out loud, because they already knew. The man who could never call her a companion finally, at the end, tells her she did well, and she gets to rest. She dissolves into light. Across the star stream, watchers react in small, terrible ways. One constellation closes her eyes. Another lets out a long sigh. Even the gods who feed on suffering are, for a moment, quiet. The chapter finds a little air after that with some human awkwardness, the surviving fighters processing, someone remarking with rueful jealousy on how beautiful she was. But the real gut punch belongs to the child. The little Yuzung, who screamed at her future self to bring Dokja back, cannot understand why this happened. She asks whether it's really true, whether she's really dead. She asks if there isn't some way to change it. Really? And then, seeing all the adults grieving, she says the thing that finishes you off, asking why everyone is crying because they're going to make her cry too. A child mourning her own future self, in a world where she was never supposed to be saved either. The 2 Yuzungs met, fought, and only one walks away, and the one who walks away is the one Kim Dokja chose to believe in. The system announces what it cares about. The 5th main scenario has come to an end. Rewards are being calculated. That's the whole of it, as far as the machinery is concerned. A woman's entire tragedy, reduced to a completed quest and a payout. And then the chapter pivots hard into something nobody saw coming. The Dakibi orders the scenario formally closed, impatient, ready to move on. And instead of an ending, enforcers arrive. Armored, implacable figures descending on the battlefield. And they aren't here for Dokja or the survivors. They're here for the mid-grade Dakibi himself. He is under arrest for violating the rules of the star stream. It's a stunning reversal. The being who manipulated this entire scenario, who forcibly rewrote a person's soul to make a better show, is suddenly the one in custody. The system that seemed absolute and unaccountable turns out to have rules of its own, and someone has just invoked them. Meanwhile the child Yuzung, shaking with grief, announces that she's going to kill him herself, and someone has to hold her back. Even in mourning, this little girl is exactly the fierce, loyal person Dokja saw in her from the beginning. What makes chapter 108 so powerful is its restraint. It could have been a triumphant chapter. The catastrophe defeated, the city saved, the villain arrested. Instead it plays almost the entire runtime as a deathbed scene, forcing you to sit with a woman who didn't want to die and the man who finally told her she did well, too late to matter and just barely in time to matter. And it leaves you with a hard, unresolved ache. Kim Dokja set out to save her and failed. He argued, schemed, possessed her mind, found the wish at the bottom of her heart, and the story killed her anyway. The scenario cleared. The audience got its show. And a person who only ever wanted to survive is gone. But those enforcers descending on the Dakibi suggest the story isn't finished with this injustice. Somebody, somewhere, decided that what happened here broke the rules. And Kim Dokja is still standing, still furious, still holding the memory of a woman nobody else bothered to understand. The scenario may be over. The reckoning clearly is not. Chapter 109 is the reckoning, and it is enormously satisfying, because it takes the smug, untouchable being who destroyed a woman for entertainment and systematically dismantles him. It's also where Kim Dokja reveals that grief, in his hands, is a long game. It opens on the arrested Dakibi facing his sentence, and the punishment is brutal by the standards of his kind. He'll be handed to the enforcers. He'll lose all rights to handle main scenarios. He'll be demoted to the lowest grade, and every achievement he's earned will be annulled. He reacts with pure panicked disbelief, sputtering, demanding they hold on a second. And his defense is fascinating, because he genuinely believes he did nothing wrong. He insists he ended the scenario perfectly. He points to the constellations and argues that they're all having fun, aren't they? He claims he never broke the rule of plausibility because he invoked scenario enforcement with the constellations agreement. In his mind, entertainment is the only law, and he delivered. The enforcer's response cuts straight to the bone. This, he says, is the problem with streamers. All they think about is the constellations. Not every Dakibi worships an audience. The chapter then explains what the enforcers actually are, and it's wonderfully grim. They're the most excellent Dakibi, ones who fell or vanished under unavoidable circumstances and were transformed into these armored figures. They exist to police the rules the showrunners like to bend. And they clarify the crucial point, that scenario enforcement can only be used when the constellations are genuinely willing to share responsibility for breaking plausibility, because the aftermath of that breakage is dangerous. And here's where the trap closes. The Dakibi protests that as long as the constellations were satisfied, everything should be fine. And the enforcer tells him to look at himself. Because he's visibly suffering the backlash of the plausibility rule, which should be impossible if the audience truly had his back. Then comes the reveal, and it is glorious. The channel is displayed, and the truth lands. The many constellations who egged him on to kill Dokja, the ones whose approval he acted on, left the channel the moment the story turned into a tearjerker. They lost interest and wandered off. The only constellations still present are the ones who support Kim Dokja. So when the Dakibi invoked the audience's agreement to forcibly rewrite a woman's soul, he was acting on the word of a crowd that had already abandoned him. He broke the deepest rule of his world for people who weren't even watching anymore. The watchers who remained, Dokja's watchers, glare and smirk and mock him openly, and he realizes with horror that he's been set up. And then the chapter delivers its best twist. The enforcers move to arrest another Dakibi as well, and the reason lands like a punchline and a gut punch at once. It was that Dakibi who called the enforcers here in the first place. Someone on the inside made the call, knowingly implicating himself, to bring the hammer down on a colleague who went too far. It's an act of real courage buried in a bureaucratic procedure, and it recontextualizes the whole arrest as something engineered rather than lucky. The condemned Dakibi is told this is his third offense, and he clearly understands what a third punishment means. And then Kim Dokja steps forward and tells everyone to hold on. What follows is one of the most gloriously petty and completely justified sequences in the series. Dokja turns to his Dakibi contact and instructs him to take 100,000 coins and upgrade him to platinum membership in the shop. When asked why, he simply says to do it. The enforcers are baffled that an incarnation could even qualify for platinum status. Dokja confirms, coolly, that he does. Because platinum members are entitled to request a private meeting with a Dakibi. And when offered his choice of any mid to high-grade Dakibi, Dokja declines the menu entirely. They already have the one he wants to talk to. He requests a private meeting with the prisoner. The request is granted. 20 minutes. Inside that private space, the Dakibi is still smug. He asks what scheme Dokja is trying to pull, whether he's here to gloat, tells him to stop bluffing because he knows Dokja is defenseless here. He works out that Dokja must want to avenge the catastrophe's death, and airily invites him to try. He points out, with total confidence, that they can't kill each other in this space. No matter how hard Dokja tries, nothing can happen to him. And then Dokja hits him. The sequence that follows is brutal and cathartic in equal measure. Blood on the floor. A Dakibi screaming in outrage and pain. Dokja explains, almost pleasantly, that he can't kill him, but he can absolutely beat him. And he does, methodically, while pointing out that this creature has probably never felt pain like this in his entire existence, never once been beaten as a Dakibi. The victim tries to weaponize the rules, warning that special penalties exist for people who exploit private meetings this way. The system dutifully deducts coins from Dokja for harming a Dakibi in the meeting space. And the Dakibi laughs, telling him to go ahead and take his best shot with whatever pitiful coins a mere incarnation could possibly have. Which is exactly the opening Dokja was waiting for. He asks how much the Dakibi thinks he actually has. He points out the obvious question nobody stopped to ask, which is how a regular incarnation became a platinum member in the first place. And then the number appears, an enormous fortune, well over 200,000 coins. He earned it, he notes, largely thanks to this very Dakibi and the scenario he ran. So the penalty per punch is trivial. He can afford to do this for a very, very long time. And the chapter closes on the line that reframes the entire sequence from petty revenge into something far more serious. This is the first of the promises he has to keep. Not a tantrum. A promise. Made to a woman as she died, or made to himself watching her die, the story doesn't spell it out yet, and it doesn't need to. Kim Dokja made promises over that death, and he is beginning, methodically, to keep them. What makes chapter 109 so enormously satisfying is that it refuses to let the injustice of the previous chapter stand unanswered. The system that seemed omnipotent has rules. The audience that seemed all-powerful is fickle and already gone. The Dakibi who treated a person's soul as a plot device gets demoted, arrested, and personally beaten bloody by the man whose story he tried to rewrite. And it perfectly showcases who Kim Dokja is. He didn't rage in the moment. He waited, calculated, spent an enormous sum on a membership tier specifically to unlock a loophole, and walked into a room where his enemy believed himself untouchable. Every ounce of it is planned. Even his revenge is a scheme. The catastrophe is still dead. Nothing brings her back. But somebody paid, and the reader who promised to build a better world just took his first concrete step toward it, with his fists. Chapter 110 closes out this arc by revealing that Kim Dokja was never actually mourning. He was planning. And the plan is so audacious that it reframes every tear shed in the previous chapters as the opening move of something enormous. It picks up with Dokja still methodically beating the arrested Dakibi, and his companions trying to talk him down. Their arguments are all sensible. This is pointless. It won't bring back their dead friend. There are no coins to be earned from it, nothing to gain. And Dokja's answer is one of the finest character statements in the entire series. He tells them he's doing it precisely because there's nothing to gain. Dakibi, he says, only ever think in terms of profit and loss. But humans find the purpose of their lives in pointless things exactly like this. It's a beautiful, defiant thesis. In a world where every action is monetized, where suffering is content and kindness is a strategy, choosing to do something purely because it means something is the most human act available. And the constellations respond to it. One of the Great Watchers is thrilled by a plot he's never seen before and sends Dokja a gift of coins. And Dokja returns them. He refuses the payment, stating flatly that he isn't putting on a show this time. That small gesture is enormous. Every previous chapter had him performing for the audience, calculating their reactions, monetizing his own drama. Here he draws a line. This grief is not for sale. Watchers who have observed him coldly all arc are visibly moved. Even the mysterious plotter takes note. Then Dokja gets to the actual point of the beating, which was never revenge for its own sake. He starts interrogating. Answer, he tells the Dakibi, if you want to live. Where is Yuzong's soul right now? The answers are grim. The demons ended up with her, and the contract over her soul changed hands during the transaction. Because Dokja borrowed the Archangel's power during the fight, the original contract was nullified, creating a mess of competing claims. And the Dakibi laughs at him, delighted to deliver the bad news. He'll never find her. Her poor soul has entered the labyrinth of the worlds. And this is where the chapter unveils what Dokja has actually been doing. Because he isn't surprised. He isn't defeated. He starts giving orders. He arranges for his channel to be left open so nobody interferes, noting with satisfaction that now there's no one left to object to what he's about to do. And then he turns to Usanga and asks her to summon her supporting constellation, the lover of the abandoned labyrinth. And then the chapter delivers its revelation through flashback, and it recontextualizes the entire death scene. Before Yuzong died, using the skill he absorbed from inside her own mind, Kim Dokja made her promises. He told her he'd help her be revived. He mentioned, with characteristic bluntness, that he's already done it twice himself and that dying isn't as bad as she might think. He told her not to worry, that she wouldn't stay dead. He admitted he didn't know how long it would take. But if she would wait, as long as she didn't truly die, he promised he would bring her back to life. So the goodbye we watched wasn't a goodbye at all. It was a contract. While everyone else was grieving, Dokja was making arrangements. The woman who said she wanted to survive was told, in her final moments by the only person who ever listened, that she would. The obstacle is enormous. If her soul has entered the labyrinth of the worlds, reviving her should be impossible. But Dokja has found a thread. No matter which world a soul originates from, every soul passes through the afterlife when it departs. If he can intercept her there, if he can retrieve her soul in transit, there's a chance. Which means he needs to strike a deal with a constellation who governs the afterlife. And there is only one address for that. He turns to Olympus and demands a deal. And then he makes the request that closes this arc with jaw-dropping audacity. Grant him a meeting with their King of the Underworld, Hades. One of the great three of Olympus, the ruler of the dead. Kim Dokja, a mortal incarnation who was nothing a few scenarios ago, is demanding an audience with a death god to negotiate the return of a soul. And the narration names it plainly. It's time for him to keep his second promise. The chapter handles the difficulty of this beautifully. Sanga's constellation, a historical figure of much lower rank, is visibly distressed, because she simply cannot summon someone of that stature. The gap between them is too vast. She was told outright that this particular lord is not someone she can call upon, and the sadness on her face when she relays it is heartbreaking. She's being asked to reach for something beyond her, for the sake of a girl she barely knew, and she can't. Sanga, perceptive as always, realizes exactly what Dokja is attempting. She asks whether it's even possible. Because reviving the dead is impossible in principle. As someone points out, if resurrection were achievable without terrible penalties, Yu Junghyuk would never have needed to regress every time he died. The rules of this universe are explicit on the subject. Dokja doesn't argue. He simply says that if he can retrieve her soul somehow, things change. And then he apologizes and refuses to say more, because he cannot reveal his plans while the constellations are watching. It's a lovely, frustrating flourish, the reader keeping his own cards face down even from his allies, because the audience is always listening. He acknowledges the cost too. Many constellations have come to hate him over this scenario. He burned enormous goodwill fighting for a woman the system wanted dead. But he says he's already made his move, and now he just needs to wait for them to take the bait. That's the line that ends the arc, and it's magnificent. Kim Dokja has laid a trap. He lost the fight, lost the woman, lost the audience's favor. And every one of those losses, it turns out, was bait for something larger that he hasn't explained yet. What makes chapter 110 such a perfect capstone is how completely it transforms the meaning of everything before it. The death that felt like total defeat was actually the beginning of a plan. The pointless beating was both genuine human grief and an interrogation. The refusal of payment was a line drawn in the sand about who he refuses to become. And the promise whispered to a dying woman is now a mission aimed at the ruler of the dead himself. 3 promises, the chapter title tells us. 1 has been kept, delivered with bloodied fists to a Dakibi who thought himself untouchable. The 2nd is now in motion, aimed at Olympus and the underworld. And a 3rd waits somewhere ahead. Kim Dokja set out to save a girl everyone said was doomed, and the universe killed her anyway. So he simply extended his timeline. If he can't save her in life, he'll go get her from death. It is the most Kim Dokja response imaginable to an unacceptable ending, and it leaves you absolutely desperate to see what happens when a reader who refuses to accept endings walks into the throne room of the god of the dead.